Okay, good morning and welcome everybody. My name is Justin Lee, Director of Government Relations for the League of Cities and Towns. Welcome everyone here for Local Officials Day and also our first LPC of the session. We're not officially starting LPC because I can't. That would be somebody with more authority than I have from the executive board, and they're stuck in another meeting, so they'll be here in a minute. But there are things we can start doing before we officially start an LPC or need to take positions or anything. So first question I have, who is here for LPC for the first time? Anyone want to admit it? Okay. All right, some new people here for LPC. So Carson, let's get going on some of the slides and let's talk about what you have even signed up for in case you don't know. So jump past this, let's just jump to the LPC slides in the interest of time. Not that our policy prism and foundational principles aren't important, but Legislative Policy Committee. So the Legislative Policy Committee provides our legislative guidance to staff. We go out there and advocate for you up on the Hill, advocate for positions that we take, but this is the body that takes positions on bills. So every city and town can elect 3 voting members. So if you don't know who your voting members are in your city or town, you can reach out to us. We can let you know who we currently have on record. And if you need to make changes to that, please let us know as well. When we do take votes, we will need to have that actual list of who is a member of the LPC. Not just anybody can vote in the LPC, although we will allow anyone to attend. If you do have a member of the ULCT board, then that person on the board is already automatically a member of the LPC, and then you can bring 3 other people aside from that. Again, anybody's welcome to participate in the meetings, but you need to be an official LPC member to vote. So Carson, let's get next slide, please. All right, so we meet weekly during the legislative session. So normally we do not meet on Wednesdays. This is just a special bonus since we're doing Local Officials Day today, and you needed something to do while you're waiting for the youth to do all their cool activities. Not that LPC isn't cool, but their activities are a little bit more fun. And they're hearing from the First Lady, and I guarantee she's better than I am. But the LPC position need a 60% consensus vote on both those in person and those remote. So if you cannot be there in person, you can still cast a vote. You can do that remotely if you can't make it. Normally we will meet on Mondays up at the Capitol. I think next slide. Meet Mondays at the Capitol in Senate Room 210. So when I say at the Capitol, I mean the Capitol complex, not the actual Capitol building. That is the Senate building. Sorry, that text is really small, but we're on the 2nd floor in 210 in the Senate buildings, Mondays at noon going forward. The one exception to that will be President's Day weekend. We don't meet on that Monday. We'll meet on the next day on that Tuesday. So any quick questions about any LPC logistics that anybody may have? We will send out reminders about LPC on Fridays. Usually we'll send that out with a Friday fax email. So you'll be able to see the agenda. You'll see what we're going to be talking about in advance of the LPC meeting. So that's LPC. Let's jump to the next thing, Carson. These are the dates. Again, the one exception there being Tuesday. If you don't want to remember dates, just Mondays at 12. That'll get you there. Next slide. All right, bill tracking. If you go to ulct.org/bills, you can see our bill tracker. Now, this was giving me a little bit of consternation because last year we did not have an LPC on Wednesday, the 2nd day of the legislative session. And so at our first LPC, the bill tracker was complete in that we had positions and staff analysis done on virtually all of the bills. We don't have that today. So if you go to I'm just owning up to it right now. So if anyone goes to the bill tracker and says, wow, this is really incomplete, you are correct. It is really incomplete right now. We are working through all the bills. By Monday, we'll have the bill tracker more complete. But when you go to this, you can see what the bill is and get a link directly to the bill. You can see what our position is on it. Our position could either be neutral or opposed, support. We may have no position on a bill, or it could say position pending. If you go look at the bill tracker right now, you're going to see blank spaces, but you're also going to see a few where we looked at it and then said, geez, we got to look into this more, and it will say position pending on that right now. Is that a fire alarm or something? Okay. It's either that or, yeah, someone was getting abducted by aliens. So Bill Tracker, this will be updated. Now, we do have, and now I'm offering this out there, and I'm simultaneously going to kind of try to dissuade you from it. So yes, I'm a little bit speaking out of both sides of my mouth. We can give you access to get to the back end of the Bill Tracker. So if you don't want to just look at this page, if you actually want to get in there and look at some more in-depth of the staff analysis, if you want to go look in some of the notes that we're making on things, you can do that. We can give you access to that. We do have the rights to give people access to that. Now that being said, if you don't feel like you're actually going to jump in there, or we can give you access and you can jump in there and say, geez, this is boring, I do not want access to this anymore, let us know. But if you would like that, please reach out to us as staff. We can get you access to some of those notes and some of those back and forth. In some cases, if there's a bill that we're working on more in depth, we may actually want you to have access to that because we are sharing notes back and forth there. But that being said, the public bill tracker is out there. It gets updated in real time. So if we go in there and update a bill position from neutral to support or neutral to oppose or vice versa, whatever we do, as soon as we update that in the back end, it will display publicly, so there's no lag time on that. What we'll do at the end of every LPC is we will pull up the bill tracker and ask you to ratify the positions that are on there. As many of you know, we track roughly 200 plus bills on any given legislative session. We do not have time on Mondays between 12 and 1:30 to take a position on every single one of those bills individually. So what we do is we talk about some of the high-level bills at LPC. We talk about some of the more controversial ones or the ones we need to debate. And then we will say, here's a list of everything. This is like the legal language at the end of a commercial where they do it really, really fast. We show you all the bill tracking really, really fast and ask you to ratify it. So if you would like to look in advance, that may help you, but we will bring that up at the end of every LPC and ask you to ratify positions. Now, if you don't like one of our positions, our staff recommended positions, please let us know. Please tell us that, and then we can take that to the body and have a vote about whether or not we should change our position on that or decide what that should look like. So I think that's what we've got on Bill Track, and Mayor Kafusi, welcome. I have not officially started the meeting. I'm just up here talking. You can officially start the meeting whenever you want to. So Mayor Kafusi is our second vice chair right now in the executive board, our first vice chair, our first vice chair, and Mayor Kafusi actually runs LPC. She's in charge of it. So when we take positions, Mayor Kafusi will be up here asking for those positions, asking for votes. We just get up here and do all the boring talking. So Mayor Kafusi, I'll turn it to you to say anything you'd like to.
First of all, I apologize. I hate starting meeting late. We were up in the cities of the first-in-class cities, and the homeless topic is just brutal. We could go on for 9 hours on that up there. So I apologize. That's why we're a little bit late getting started, but welcome to our LPC. This usually is our best and biggest of the whole year, so thank you to everyone for coming out. I don't have an agenda, but I do know my first order of business is to approve the minutes from the last LPC. Has anyone had a chance to look at those and is willing to make a motion? Oh, thanks, Gary. We have a motion and a second. Oh, Ezra, thank you. All right, is there any reason and discussion? All right, then I'll call it to a vote. All in favor of approving last month's meeting minutes, please raise your hand. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. And again, I don't have an agenda, so Justin, it's all you.
Beautiful. Okay, thank you, Mayor. If we get the slides back up, because you can see me whether or not the camera's there, right? There we go. All right, a couple of things to keep you abreast of what's going on during the legislative session. We have daily briefing calls that will be held from 10:15 to 10:45 a.m. You notice 10:15 to 10:45 a.m. Now, one, you don't have to join these daily briefing calls. What we do on the daily briefing calls, and these are mostly for people who are going to be at the Capitol on a given day or have interest on a particular bill on any given day, But we go through and do a quick brief of what's ever coming up in committee, either that afternoon or the next morning. We strategize really quickly on what we're going to do with them, and then we go on with the day. Now, the reason I bring that up is because last year they were great, but we sometimes spent an hour and a half on daily briefings in the morning, and I know that takes a large chunk of people's day to do that. So if you were scared away last year and you wanted to jump in again, 10:15 to 10:45 a.m., you reach out to Carson or I, and we can get you the information for those daily briefing calls if you're interested. But again, not anything that you have to be a part of there. Next slide. Nightly emails. If you are at this meeting, you are pretty much assured to be getting our nightly email. This is where we pull the list. Every night we will give you an update. We'll tell you what went on that day, what bills were debated, any big bills that may be coming up the next day that we may need your help or action on. We'll make some pithy comments about what's happening. So watch for those nightly emails, as it states, coming out every night. The next slide. All right, action alerts. Action alerts are as exciting as they sound. We will send out an action alert if there is a bill that is up for vote imminently that we need your action on. So if there's a bill that we just absolutely detest, that we oppose, that we need your help on, that we haven't quite been able to kill yet, we will send an action alert and say, please contact your legislator and ask them to vote no on, pick whatever bill number keeps you up at night. Alternatively, if there's a bill we absolutely love that we need to get through, we may send an action alert and say, please contact your legislator right now and ask them to vote for da-da-da-da-da. And we will give you talking points. We won't just leave you blind on those. But if you ignore every other email we send you, if you see action alert, please read that. Those are when we need you the most. That's when we let the League Army out and reaching out on an imminent bill. All right, next slide. Okay, Carson, I will turn this over to you to talk about how we're going to use Slido today. Now, I know it is not great coverage in here, so we may have some issues, and we don't have I just asked, we don't have a Wi-Fi password that covers everybody that's out here, so we may not get everybody on this, but we are going to be using Slido to take not official positions, but to get your feedback on a few things today. I will just preface it right now with saying, because we don't have as much time as we normally would in an LPC, and in a normal LPC, as you know, if you've been there, we don't have enough time to cover everything we want to anyway. We're going to be asking you several questions, and we're not going to be getting you back the results on some of these right away today as we're asking the questions. The good news is we have another LPC on Monday that's only a couple of days away in a business sense. So we will update you on where we got some of this feedback on Monday. So yes, we're asking you for feedback on a few things today. No, we're not going to be able to tell you exactly what you all said about those things right now. Just preferencing that up front. So if you could jump on Slido, you can either go to Slido and put in that number, or you can get that QR code, and then we'll have some questions for you in just a few minutes. There is not a great Wi-Fi that I can share with you, unfortunately. I know the coverage isn't great. I apologize for that. Terrible is another word I have heard. If we'd like to make a motion on terrible Wi-Fi or coverage. Okay, Carson, anything else you want to say about Slido?
Sorry, try it again. Just had to restart it. It didn't launch the first time through. So that should be visible to you now.
And if anybody went to the mock committee hearings, we just debated with the youth council's cell phone use in school. So when everyone held up their phones, that was just a nice little juxtaposition with our conversation a few minutes ago.
All right. By show of hands, anybody having issues getting on, or is it kind of working? Issues? Okay.
Having issues getting on.
Yeah, ask if
Okay.
anybody got it. Nobody on our road yet.
That's not working.
Yep.
Hopefully people are getting on. It says it's working on the back end.
So some people are getting on, some are not. All right.
So the first two questions, and this is all informal. This is not a formal position or anything. We're just trying to gauge some opinions. So I'll give another minute for people to try to get on while we ask the first couple questions, which will just be some test questions to see which cities we have in the room today. All right. So first, you should be prompted on Slido with what your title is. Lots of mayors and administrators. Great. I'll just give it another second or two. All right, well, we'll do this next one here. So now we're asking for cities. All right. Well, you should be able to keep adding questions as we move on. We've got some content to get into, but again, we'll be asking a couple of Slido questions parsed throughout here. We're hoping to be able to use this throughout the session to gain informal information just to try to see how we can direct policy to better fit your needs. With that, I will close this part of the Slido. Keep it open on your devices if you want to answer those extra questions, and I'll turn it over to Cameron.
Yeah, you want me to do the quotes? All right, I'm going to swing this around a little bit so I can read these better. All right, if you were at our conference just next door at the Salt Palace a few months ago, we showed these quotes when we had our caucus meetings, and these are some quotes that had happened right before the caucus meeting. One from the governor: I believe that government is a major piece of the expense of housing in our state, and believe that it's going to take bold initiative to change that. And I'm not going to read the speaker's whole one, but basically he said there's things happening at the local level that are slowing down housing, specifically called that out. So good news is there's actually been a little bit of change in messaging in the last couple of months. We've met with the speaker, we met with the governor's office, we've shown them all the things that you as cities are doing. Now I'm not saying they said, you know what, you guys are good, we don't need to do anything, because they still want to do plenty of things on housing, and we're going to talk about that. But if we can get the next slide, the tenor of their comments has changed just a little bit. Last week, the governor said, well, and these are not direct quotes, more thoughts, but we have tens of thousands of lots entitled, but we need the infrastructure to build. So we reached out to you as cities, we asked you to help us get those numbers about lots that have been entitled, about how many permits have been out there, and using those numbers, the governor said, yes, there are a lot of lots entitled now. I see that. It's not just that nobody's doing anything. And then also talking about the decision making. You're going to be able to make a decision once, then we're going to build the homes. And we're going to talk a little bit about more some of those proposals look like. And then Speaker Wilson said, the majority of cities are doing the right thing with housing. Yesterday, in his opening remarks, the speaker specifically praised Ogden and Mayor Caldwell, praised Clearfield Mayor Shepard, praised South Jordan Mayor Ramsey, specifically on his floor speech, and said they were doing great work on housing. So we have had a little bit of a switch where they're not just saying cities are the problem, they're saying a lot of cities are doing really good work, and we want to see if we can expand that. So want to bring that up because the things that you have provided to us, the information you have given to us when we reached out and asked for numbers, when we asked for research, has actually helped change the narrative. We shared that, they responded, they've looked at it. Now, it didn't completely change the underlying things that we need to work on, but they have had to respond to that. So thank you for everything you provided to us. That has helped us as we've been talking to them over the interim. So with that framing, Cam, I'll kick you over to talk about UAC and some of our questions.
Perfect. Thank you, can you go back to the slide? Because I'm going to walk through what was presented at the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission last week. Okay, yeah, just making sure I'm on the right slide. Part of the reason I like putting text on slides is I know people do what exactly some of you are doing right now, which is take pictures of the slide. So feel free to do so. Last week at the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission, and as a reminder, that's the group that meets year-round, has so for the last couple of years, brings together the legislative branch and the executive branch, and the league has an appointment on that commission. It's Mayor Don Ramsey, who's now the immediate past president of the league. They went through about 50 issues. In many ways, most of the big policy conversations happening at the Capitol run through the UEOC now and not just through the legislature. And they went through about 50 items. We're going to hit some highlights today. The Commission on Housing Affordability co-chair, Senator Lincoln Fillmore and Representative Stephen White, they presented what they intend to put in the initial draft of their bill. Now, you've seen the highlights in Friday Facts for the last couple of months because we've been waiting for this initial draft bill. We know it's being drafted. We've met with the drafting attorneys in recent days, so we expect to have it in the next few days, potentially even by next Monday's LPC. Stay tuned. Here are the highlights. First, the subdivisions proposal that we actually got from the feedback from you at the annual convention, and then our policy committee, well, first the board endorsed the framework, and then we presented to the policy committee in October. That piece will be a centerpiece of the Commission on Housing Affordability bill. That's good news, because that piece is there instead of some of the terrible ideas that had been floating around during the summer. The incomplete news are around station area plans and internal accessory dwelling units. These would be modifications to the two bills that have passed in the last couple of years. House Bill 82 2 years ago on internal ADUs, and House Bill 462 on stationary plans last year. Working through a couple of tweaks, there are some things that we definitely don't like in the IADU modifications. But there are pieces in there that are consistent with the spirit of House Bill 82 from a couple of years ago, such as how to account for IADU units that exist above garages. Right now, House Bill 82, which created the framework for internal accessory dwelling units, is actually relatively silent on that piece. That's different than a couple of the other items that have been floated about, which would be to remove the ability of cities to regulate for parking or to have a portion of your city that does not have IADUs. And those were central to the negotiated agreement on House Bill 82. On station area plans, Farmington, I know I saw Farmington earlier. There you are. Kudos to Farmington for being the first city to get their station area plan certified. One of soon to be many, because there are 25 station area plans that are currently in process that will likely get certified in the months to come. One of the conversations, though, that's come out of the station area plan implementation piece has been clarifications around previous efforts, so prior to the bill. And Evelyn, how many times did you and I have this conversation about the Karens last year? But basically making sure that the work that was done prior to the bill still gets counted, as well as the potential role of the city council in reviewing the final site plan. Because as a reminder, in the subdivision proposal that we brought forward, it would create a subdivisions proposal or subdivisions process for all cities and counties to utilize a two-step process, and that second step would be handled by staff, not by elected officials. So it's the same conversation, but around potentially the final site plan review within the station area plan. So that's why we've listed it up there as TBD, because there's still a lot of moving pieces. Then the fourth piece is the consequences for House Bill 462 compliance. The bill is going to have major, well, I shouldn't use major, it will have modifications to the existing 462, because we recognize there have been a lot of growing pains around the implementation of that bill. In fact, I just saw several people with the furrowed brows because of the growing pains of trying to implement that bill. The bad news is that the majority of cities were not in compliance as of that initial review in November. The good news is that we negotiated last year into the bill a 90-day cure period, which we're currently in, for cities to work through that compliance. And again, there's growing pains on our side, and there's growing pains on DWS's side. But DWS has gone above and beyond in trying to meet with cities to help figure out what your individual city needs to do to comply. They were under no obligation, legal obligation to do that, but they dedicated a tremendous amount of staff time over the last few weeks to try to work individually, one-on-one with cities to work towards compliance. As of yesterday, I got the update from DWS, and a quarter of the cities that were found out of compliance in November have already been found in compliance, and there's still another month to go in the cure period. So I still think when it's all said and done that the majority of cities are going to be in compliance with 462, but we do need to make some modifications just based on the growing pains of implementing that bill. I also urge you to work collaboratively with DWS. We've gotten reports of cities that have been less than professional interacting with DWS, and I've actually had legislators call me and say, your cities are complaining about 462, we should just do X, Y, and Z mandates on you. It's in our best interest to work together with DWS, identify the problems that need to be fixed, but then let's get that right so that the narrative isn't that cities are just being obstinate. So we've been working through those modifications. Can you go to the next slide? I don't have a clicker, so I feel somewhat vulnerable up here. Okay, now this is recognizing that we are working through modifications to improve 462. There is still a lot of appetite from legislators to have an additional consequence if a city is not in compliance with 462. Under current law, if, I'm just gonna use Farmington because I just praised you, so now I'm gonna pick on you. If Farmington was out of compliance under the current law, then Farmington would be ineligible to access the State Transportation Investment Fund. That's existing law, that's been the law for several years. But the appetite up there is to actually increase the consequences if you're out of compliance. There's not a bill for you to vote on today, but what would be helpful for us when we meet with the league board this afternoon is we're gonna tell you what's been discussed, and then in Slido, we want you to rank these and let us know which one is the least objectionable up to the most objectionable. Then we can go back to the board and say, the membership told us they could live with this, but this is an absolute line in the sand. And that would be helpful information for the board as we are trying to finalize our approach here. So these are the ones that were formally discussed within the Commission on Housing Affordability. Oh, go back. First is withholding Class B and C revenue. That was what was referenced in the KSL and Desert News article last week. When Mayor Ramsey commented about the bill, she raised concerns about this piece. She wasn't quoted in the article about raising concerns about this piece. She did raise concerns about this piece. So that addresses some of the texts and emails I've gotten since then. But we're opposed to the state weaponizing the Class C revenue for cities. A second item is to authorize attorney's fees. So if Farmington's out of compliance, then someone could sue Farmington to come into compliance and recover attorney's fees. The third concept would be right now state law actually has a remedy for a property owner to require the city to take action within 45 days on administrative land use action. We've had discussions of if there's an affordable housing proposal, that automatically gets the ripcord. You don't have to wait for a developer to pull that ripcord. The fourth piece is if the city doesn't review it within a certain time, and that 45 days is current law. So we didn't invent that number, that's current law. But if the city doesn't make a decision within 45 days, it's deemed approved. So it just automatically happens and gets built even without the city approval. We've been fighting that concept all year. The last one is non-compliant cities are ineligible for potential new transportation dollars. We've had lots of discussions about modifying what's known as the fifth and having cities receive a portion of that directly, but then saying you can only receive that money if you're compliant with 462. So that would be new money that you are not currently receiving. Okay, next slide. These are the ones that have been discussed informally. So if you were to go back and listen to all of the CHA recordings, which I don't recommend, you want to hear these, but these are the hallway conversations. First, if the city takes longer than that 45-day period under the ripcord, then the city would have to refund the development fees. This is what the Florida legislature passed last year. And interestingly, we've talked to the Florida League staff and Florida League leadership about the impacts of this bill. The second, man, that's tough to read. Okay. The second would be the state mandate that housing is a permitted use in any zone in your city. The third would be like a state density bonus. So if you're out of compliance with 462 and you allow 3 units to the acre, then during the time you're out of compliance, you would have to allow 4 units to the acre. Okay, so it'd be that sort of state mandated density bonus. And then, a state housing appeals board. This is becoming more and more common around the country. The state legislatures are creating appeals boards for property owners to go around the city. And then the last one would be that if Farmington's out of compliance, they would pay a fine to the Olene Walker Housing Fund. That is a state fund that provides dollars to developers to invest and develop low-income and affordable housing. So the fine would have a nexus to housing development. It would just not be in your city. I recognize nobody likes any of these. Okay, this is why I don't sleep, is because these are the conversations we're having basically on a daily basis. But what we want to be able to inform the board this afternoon is, are there any items in here that are less objectionable and worth discussing, with the big caveat that these would apply if a city is not in compliance with 462. So it would not just be, this applies to every city. It's, you've had your chance to be in compliance. We fixed some of the problems with 462 this year. And then after that period of time, then these consequences would take effect. So with that being said, Carson, can you do Slido? Great. I'm going to pause for a second. Does anybody have any questions or any clarifying thoughts here before you fill out the Slido?
Really quickly, just want to reiterate that it's ranking them with number 1 being the most objectionable or most concerning, number 10 being the least objectionable or least concerning. So just to make sure we're all on the same scale.
Yep. And I realize a lot of people want to do, let's see, if most is like you want to put 1 for everything. I get that. And they all 10 should show up in your Slido, even though they don't all show up on the screen. While you finish filling this out, in about 20 minutes, legislators are going to start arriving. You're going to have them at your table. This is our most important day of the session because you have a chance to bend the ears of your legislators. And it's critical as you're talking to them that 1, you let them know what your city is doing to plan for growth. And 2, you tell them we want to be partners, so as these bills come out, make sure those legislators are communicating directly with you about the impact in your city. And if you have concerns about some of the things we're talking about in this meeting, share them with legislators. You've got this lunch hour in the next hour to really take advantage of having them with you. Okay, I heard my name, Nathan. Nathan asked a very important question on the refund. Development fees, is that like a plan review fee, application fee, impact fees? We went back and forth on how to describe that for purposes of the question, and that's why we just left it general. But I think that's part of the discussion. If we went that route, what does that actually mean? In the case of I can get you the Florida bill, and I'd welcome your thoughts on it, because certainly for a fast growth city, it looks a little different than for a city that is maybe built out. Okay, Carson, let's just move on, and you can collect, because you're collecting all the Slido results, right?
Yeah, and if anybody has any additional feedback, I know these are all very high-level summaries, and there's a ton of nuance that could be packed in here. So if you have additional thoughts, we welcome that. You can find me today, or you can email me at keilers@ulct.org, and I will compile your feedback in.
Perfect. Perfect. In terms of, so Justin, I'm going to turn it over to you in a moment to do lids. As Justin walks up, let me just give you a couple of data points that as you're having lunch with your legislators today, we urge you to emphasize. Number 1, the housing gap that Utah was experiencing 4.5 years ago was 56,000 units. So we were short 56,000 units compared to the number of new households. As of this past July, that number had shrunk from 56,000 to 31,000. And that's in large part due to the planning efforts of local governments. Over the last 3 years, cities have permitted more housing units than any 3-year period in state history, and the largest percentage of multifamily and townhomes than in any time in state history. Likewise, in addition to that 125,000 units in the last 3 years permitted, our internal research shows that there's over 111,000 entitled units that are waiting for permits. So there is a lot of potential housing in the pipeline. And so as you're meeting with legislators, at the high level, make sure they know the housing gap has almost shrunk in half in the last few years. In the aggregate, cities have approved more housing in the last 3 years than any time in state history. And while there still is a gap and there's still a shortage and we still have challenges around affordability, cities want to be partners. We don't want to be preempted. We also recognize that there are a handful of cities, because we've met with some of them, who have basically said up yours to House Bill 462, or we don't want to participate in these conversations around growth. And that's the complicating factor that we're trying to figure out with the board, is how much political capital to spend defending the cities that don't want to be partners, as opposed to defending the cities that are being legitimate, good faith partners in how we grow. Those are unanswered questions for the next 7 weeks. Speaking of unanswered questions, Justin, you've got a few here, so I'll turn it over to you to talk about lids.
Beautiful. Just the one thing I'll say before we talk about lids, I know we're not talking about the hat shop at the mall. There's a pamphlet out there. Some of you have seen the pamphlet before. We've distributed a few times. It has a 100,000 on the front of it, talking about how many permits we've issued, how many lots have been entitled, how much the housing gap has shrunk. There will be those pamphlets. Susan's smiling. She knows this one. We tweaked it just a little bit, not as much, just a little. But there will be pamphlets near the tables when you go in to check in for lunch. So if you need some of the numbers that you don't have right on the tip of your tongue like Cam does, we do have pamphlets there that you can share with legislators that you can talk about. So please grab one of those as you're talking to legislators. But with that, let's jump back to the slide on lids. So what is a lid? Well, lids used to be dids, which, yes, I know. So earlier in the summer, there was a proposal dealing with what ultimately became called a did. The did, we're just going to ignore that because now we're calling them lids. And again, not the hat shop at the mall, limited infrastructure districts. So we've talked about these at LPC a few times, so I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about them today, but just to rehash some high points. So the idea is to allow developers a funding mechanism to help deal with infrastructure by accessing the public bond market. So a lid would require consent from all of the property owners in a proposed district. They would not be able to use the mill levy like they would with PIDs. This is not a property tax thing. They would pay them off. They would pay it off incrementally at the time of building permit. And if you say I have a lot of questions and there's a lot of nuance on that, yes, there is, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. Let's see where there are high points. I can't even read that from here. Lids would have no zoning or subdivision authorities. They would still have to comply with the local ordinances as far as land use goes and approval, and does it comply with the general plan, etc. But there are a lot of unanswered questions. One of the questions there down at the bottom is, in order to access the bond market, the public bond market, they would need some kind of sovereign power, whether that's eminent domain authority or some kind of taxing authority or police power. And I know some of you just said, done right now, we don't want to have any more discussion, this is over, we're opposed. But let me give you a little bit of the political landscape on this one. And I know some of you hate this so much already, but this is the reality of the legislative session. The speaker really, really likes this concept. I know some of you say, who cares? I care because he controls the bills. We have to talk to the speaker about this one. If not, we can kiss a lot of other things goodbye. Now, I'm not saying we have to ever come to a place where we support this bill. I'm not saying we have to like this bill. But I'm saying we do have to talk about this bill and give it a serious look, or we're shooting ourselves in the foot politically. Because the speaker, when we asked him what does success look like, said dids. Now, they were dids at the time, now they're lids. When we went to the UEOC last week and they had the meeting, they talked about all the things they talked about all year long, dozens of different proposals. They took one motion on every proposal, all of the proposals together, like a dozen different things they just took one motion on, except when the speaker said, I would like to make a motion on lids. And the UEOC voted to support the concept of lids. Now, Mayor Ramsey is our representative on that committee, and she abstained from the vote. She got put in a horrible position because we were told before the meeting that there would not be any specific motions. It would just be one big omnibus motion at the end. So to give you just an idea of the political landscape there, the speaker really, really wants us to talk about that. Now, again, not saying we're going to support this, not saying we're ever going to get to a place where we like it, but we would be doing ourselves a disservice if we did not talk about this and look at the questions and come back with it. So with that, next slide, we need a group of people. We need to put some Avengers together. That's what it sounded like as it came out of my mouth. We need a group of special individuals. But we do need a group who wants to help us look in depth at the lids. Now, I don't have it up here right now, but imagine a very, very long table with questions and answers and text in red and text in blue and going back and forth that would take a long time to go through. We have a lot of questions outstanding on this that we need to hash through. So with that, can I get the next slide up? We need a group of special individuals to help us talk about this. So, yeah, absolutely. Do you want to say it before I talk about the group or after? Okay, yeah, Mayor Silvestrini.
So first of all, who said who cares when we asked by the speaker? Mark, I knew it would be you, right? So can a city manager be league president? I'm going to trade you. I'll become a city manager down in Saratoga. But I just want to say that a little bird has talked to me. It's not just the speaker that likes this idea. It's President Adams and it's Governor Cox. And so the ask that I got is kind of like, is there any way the league can get to at least neutral on this proposal? And my response to that is, depends. The guardrails that Justin's talked about have to be present before I think any of us would consider this kind of thing. And so we don't want to have to accept incomplete infrastructure. We don't want to have a liability on our municipalities to have to complete something, and we don't want to give them taxing authority, because it always comes back to the cities raising our taxes when some unaccountable board raised a property tax that they don't understand. So we will continue to work to try to refine this to the point where we hope we can come back and present it to you. But I just want to say that, even though we don't like it, we fight a lot of battles on the Hill. And just as in terms of practicality, sometimes you got to figure out the battles that you can win and the ones that you aren't going to win. And the ones you aren't going to win, you just try to cut your losses as much as you can. So the little bird suggested to me that we should work really hard on this one. So I'm going to just ask, Justin's asked for volunteers on this, but we need some people to help work on this, to pound back on the idea, to make sure that we get guardrails on it so that it is minimally palatable. And I will submit that I don't think any of us are interested in any kind of regard of turning over either police power or taxing authority to some unaccountable entity. The eminent domain part is also gagging, but the power company and irrigation companies and other entities that we don't control do have that power, so that's probably the least objectionable sovereign power.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. So, Carson, if we can get the slide, jump to this one. So, we need 5 or 6 individuals who want to delve into this with us. Some of you might know we've already hit this up before, but we need some people with experience in Greenfield. We need some people with experience in PIDs. If you're doing redevelopment, fixing a lot of existing infrastructure, if you've got, experience with the inland port, for example, we couldn't be that too specific, could we? Or if you're on the rural-urban fringe, we're looking for volunteers. If you want to raise your hand right now, we'll take them. So we've got... And we can't take, everyone from Salt Lake, I'm just saying. But, okay, we got there.
Okay, just keep your hands up.
Okay.
And make a list.
I'm working back, Mark. I'm getting there. Okay, I've got Nathan over here. I've got Mark. I've got Ryan. Sorry, my light is right in my... Ezra's right there. Who else do I got? Tawny. Oh, right here. Okay, who else we got in the back? Sorry, the lights are in my eyes. I can't see that great. Just yell at some name. Matt Park City. This is the expanded MCU, not just like original Avengers. It's gotten a lot bigger. St. George. Yep. Lisa. I think we got everybody. Anybody we didn't say? Okay. So what we'll do is with this group, we will reach out. We will specifically meet and hash through all of these different things. And Mayor Silvestrini is right. We've got to take a serious look at this. And if we can't get to yes on some things, that's great. But we also have to recognize if the political leaves turn that this thing's going to pass, we want to make sure it is the least bad bill it can possibly be if it's going to go somewhere. If it's not going to go somewhere, then we want to make sure that we have the discussions we need to get that there in the right way as well. Okay. I think we got what we need. Let's jump to the next slides. We got a couple more Slido questions, and then we get you out of here to lunch. Did we skip a slide?
No, I think we just skip it because the bus just left.
Okay. You want to talk about the tax ones?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to do rapid fire on revenue pieces because the first bus of legislators just left, and we want to make sure you're ready to, go back to the slide. We want to make sure you're ready to welcome them when they arrive. So, long story short, it's going to be the year of the tax cut at the legislature, and one of the points you're going to hear Mayor Silvestrini reference at lunch today with legislators is just because the state has a budget surplus doesn't mean we do. In fact, state has a surplus, cities do not. So we are actually, where's Molly? Molly, are you? Yeah, there's Molly Wheeler, our policy director. She is building out a master spreadsheet of all of the potential bills that have fiscal impacts on cities so we can present that aggregate information to legislators. On the gas tax, there's going to be a gas tax reduction that will impact cities because we're a portion of the gas tax. The state's planning to cut their portion. If they cut their portion, they have to cut our portion. It's just a matter of how much right now, and we've been in those conversations. Likewise, there's been discussion about potentially modifying the gas tax in other ways for rural Utah, and then I mentioned the non-compliance earlier. On the property tax side, there's going to be a potential constitutional amendment around the 45% exemption, which could change how truth and taxation, or how property tax is calculated for purposes of truth and taxation. There's also been a lot of rumbling about potential caps on the use of property tax or limits on how local governments can increase property taxes. Likewise, we actually recommend we support House Bill 56. It's one of the few bills that's actually been drafted, and it's a tax commission-led bill that we think will actually lead to better outcomes at the county level on assessment. Next slide. Not quite that far. There we go. Okay, good news is that we have made some good progress on the sales tax. Right now, there is what's known as the fifth, that a county imposes it, and it goes to transit exclusively, and it has to be imposed by June. We've gotten some good traction at the idea of repurposing some of that money so that if a county imposes it, some of that money directly flows to cities. And again, part of that conversation has been the 462 compliance. So trying to get direct money that you control in your budget through the fifth. Likewise, yeah, so I listed what some of the changes are that are being considered there. There's also been a lot of discussion in recent days about removing the sales tax on food. Right now, of all the sales taxes that exist out there, there are only two that tax food. The state reduced rate of 1.75%, so not the full rate of 4.75, the 1.75, and our local 1%. The UTA taxes, the other county-imposed sales taxes, resort community taxes, none of those have food in their base, but the local 1% does, and the state 1.75%. We estimate that impact in the aggregate on cities would be roughly $99 million if food were to come out of the base and there was no rate adjustment. We've shared that information with state leaders. This is still up in the air. We're still at the time in the session right now where there are just lots of different ideas coming, and there's going to be something in the tax space, and the question is, what are the ripple effects of that something on local governments? So that's why we're giving you all the information now so that you're prepared as things start to come together to be able to explain, state, if you do this, if you pull this lever on gas tax, it will have this direct impact on our ability to pay for roads. If you do this on if you do this on property tax or on sales tax, it has this direct ability on our ability to pay for police officers. So be ready for that messaging in the days to come as we get more information. The last thing is that we expect an attack on the ability of all governmental entities to impose fees and what the structure is and how you do fees and how you calculate them. So again, there's a lot a lot of spaghetti on the wall right now. We're trying to give you all of it so that you're prepared, and stay tuned to the daily email, Friday Facts, and LPC as these pieces come together, and be prepared to lobby your legislator so your legislator knows what the ripple effects are of these bills and these ideas on your ability to provide services and infrastructure to your residents. We had a couple more Slido questions, but let's hold off on those until Monday because the first bus of legislators has left. They're on their way. Carson, we just go to the last slide? Yeah, so stay tuned. We track more than 200 bills every session. You know, we basically, those are the only ones we really got to today, and then there are all these other moving pieces. So if you, as an individual or your city, want to be involved in any of these issues, grab a league staffer and say, I'd like to make sure that my voice is at the table on this issue or this issue or this issue, and we will plug you in either formally like we did with the LID subcommittee or informally, which happens every day. Is that it? Yep. Great. That's where you get all the information is on our website. Thank you for being here. Do we need to take a vote to ratify positions or wait till Monday? Okay, we'll wait to make the ratification vote until Monday. Please take advantage of your time with legislators. Thank you for being here at Local Officials Day, and we will see you on Monday.